Marcus.
Thank you. Thank you. We're resuming on private members' business. Wind Turbine Regulations Bill 2014, second stage, and the technical group have 10 minutes remaining. There's Deputy Richard Boyd Barrett, Mick Wallace, and Tom Pringle. Yeah, it's Deputy Richard Boyd Barrett.
So it's, yeah, 3.5 minutes, is it? Or 3 minutes and whatever, 30 seconds. Okay, first of all, I think it's good news that the government are not opposing this bill. I'd commend Sinn Féin for putting it forward, but mostly I think it's a tribute to the people in the Midlands, in Laois and Offaly and Westmeath and elsewhere who have campaigned and forced this issue onto the agenda, and who are not opposing by any means, and certainly in supporting this bill, I'm not opposed, far from it, to the development of renewable energy resources. But there are major questions in developing those resources about the impact on local communities, about proper public consultation with those communities, about health and safety issues, and about the efficiency and viability of this industrialised, corporatist approach to developing renewable energy resources. And really, the bottom line is the government have not done their homework in these areas to really establish the case for these things, to set out a regime which ensures proper environmental protection, proper consideration of local communities, and indeed the business case in terms of the real efficiency from an environmental point of view of these huge types of turbines. I mean, a simple fact somebody told me today is that for a wind turbine you need 200 tonnes of concrete in order to put it up. And every tonne, for every tonne of concrete, that's 1 tonne of carbon dioxide. And given the relatively short lifespan of wind turbines, even there you can see there are serious problems, not to mention construction costs, transport costs, all that kind of stuff, the infrequency of wind. There's major issues which need to be looked at. And that's also true, not just the Midlands. I would also refer to the Dublin Array project, plans to put one of the biggest wind farms in the world off a very short distance off the coast of Dublin Bay, in a way that could be very seriously detrimental to that bay as an amenity, and could well be a case of cutting off your nose to spite your face, because the damage you do to an amenity, to a piece of heritage, from a tourist point of view and other points of view, could far outweigh any supposed or spurious economic advantage you might get from this. But I really want to conclude by what I would say is ringing the alarm bells about the sort of corporatist and industrialised approach to developing renewable energy resources, and how it is not the way to go. And I mean, if I just look at some of the players in this situation, Element Power, previously owned by the person who had what they call SWS Energy, who got the interconnector rights for wind energy into the national grid from, as I understand it, Noel Dempsey, got them for a song for a few million, and then recently sold them to Bord Gáis for $500 million. A company that only has 50 million people and happens to be owned by somebody who was, I think, a former Fine Gael candidate, or somebody very close to Fine Gael.
Thank you.
So this is the sort of stuff that really needs to be looked into. Was there ever a tender when those interconnector rights went out? Was there open competition? Is this another example, like we had around Aircom and so on, of people plundering natural resources for their own profit, not for the benefit of our economy, our society, or our environment?
Colleagues now, Deputy Mick Wallace.
Thank you, Russell Corla. I too welcome the fact that the government are not opposing the bill. Hopefully it's not something that's connected to the local elections and that is genuine. Obviously, agreeing to the setback distances and the provisions relating to noise and shadow flicker are definitely to be welcomed. We don't seem to have a developed energy strategy, and not that it's easy to have one, given that so many things have been changing so fast in the last few years, but before we proceed with building more wind turbines, especially on land, I think we have to seriously consider what's involved. There's a lot of concern that, given the volatility of wind power, that maybe other options need to be considered a bit more strongly first. Despite being an island and having 3,000 miles of Atlantic to our left, to the west, it is still strange that we consider wave power as something just beyond affordability, I think, still. But I think this is something that probably deserves a bit more research again. With regard to the wind turbines that were planned for the Midlands, there's little doubt, but the Aarhus Convention was being contravened. I mean, it demands access to information, public participation in decision-making, and access to justice. There's no doubt about it, but the amount of consultation that has gone on in this process is very weak, and it would be nice if the government change the stand a little bit and give people a little bit more say in their communities. I suppose the same topic is relevant to the air grid project, and too often serious decisions seem to be made, and you wonder sometimes even if the government people actually believe that what they're doing is best, and sometimes they do appear to be driven by pressure from large business, which does happen sometimes, not always the case, but in this case, I think there is some grounds for concern that more thought needs to be put into this, rather than giving into the pressure of some serious players. Just another idea that has been mentioned is the high wind projects that Statoil and the Norwegian state have engaged in. And I see that they're doing some work with Scotland in this area, where they're actually putting the work out they're working out at sea without having to actually go down to the seabed. There is a process where they don't actually have to be anchored on the sea, which is expensive. And given that we have so much sea available to us, especially off the west coast, I think it's something that we should look at before we destroy the landscape for all and sundry. Thank you.
Deputy Thomas Pringle.
Thank you, Last Corla. And I would like to just start off by congratulating Sinn Féin on bringing forward this wind turbine regulation bill 2014. And I think it's interesting that the government have indicated that they're not going to oppose this piece of legislation, which I think is welcome. And as I understand it, the term is that you're not going to oppose it, which is, I think, is different than actually accepting it. And you know, and I think that this might be something in the timing of this debate, in that this bill isn't being opposed. All right. So, well, that's convenient, because I'm sure that'll be another few months anyway before that comes forward. So then we can look forward to the bill progressing through committee stage, report stage, and being adopted. And that'll be very interesting to see that process taking place. You know, and I hope that happens, Minister, and it'd be nice to see that it would. You know, rather than this bill gathering dust and falling with the general election in 2016, which I would think at this stage, and you might call me cynical, but I would think that that's more than likely what's going to happen. And I would like to get odds from Paddy Power on that in relation to just exactly what the process would be.
Short odds on that one, I think.
I think so.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, well, in relation to the legislation itself, and it is a response to the controversy that's taken place across the Midlands in relation to wind turbine and wind turbine development, and proposals there for industrial-style wind farms to be developed. And I think the most significant thing that has taken place in the last couple of months is the decision by the British government not to go ahead with the agreement with the state for the purchase of the energy produced, and I think that's probably the thing that's going to save the communities across the Midlands and have the biggest impact in relation to this, because I think that it is completely wrong. In relation to the provisions within the bill, in relation to noise and shadow flicker, I actually believe the bill should go further. And I think that what should take place is that the proposers of wind farm developments should model their developments in such a way that no turbine is placed within the noise of a house or the shadow flicker of a house, because you can have set distances, whether they're 10 times the turbine height or whatever, but given the topography of the land, that could still provide for flicker and noise. So I think they should be able to model those conditions and be able to ensure local communities that there wouldn't be any noise and flicker, and that should be in the regulations rather than set distances. And obviously it'll be different for each development depending on the lay of the land and the topography, but that should be developed. But I think also what should be in the bill is that the environmental impact assessments being carried out by developers should actually be carried out by local authorities and should be done independently of the development, with the developers actually paying for the cost of it. Because I have yet to see an environmental impact assessment that said that a development shouldn't go ahead because of the impact it will have on the development, because they are paid for by the developers. So he who pays the piper calls the tune. So the report will always say that this development can go ahead and this development won't impact on the environment. So I think that's something that should be in law, and in fact I think it actually is EU law, and the government involved itself in some gymnastics about a year and a half ago to interpret EU law to prevent that happening and to prevent that being done. So I think that should be in the legislation, and if it moves forward to committee stage, I will be putting forward amendments in relation to it.
Now, Deputy Paddy Coffey is the first speaker here with Deputies Andrew Doyle, Helen McEntee, Michelle Mulhern and Charlie Flanagan. Deputy Coffey, 6 minutes.
Thank you very much, Las Concorla. I too welcome the opportunity to contribute to this debate, and it gives all of us an opportunity to debate the issues not just around wind energy, but also to outline our views on other renewable alternatives and electricity generators that should be considered. I was reading up some statistics there from the Sustainable Energy Authority of Ireland, and they state clearly that renewable energy to date has saved Ireland over €1 billion in fossil fuel imports. Ireland's dependence on the importation of fossil fuels stood at 85% in 2012. It was 90% in 2006. And we spend over €6.5 billion per year on fossil fuel imports. So, you know, it is quite clear to me anyway, as one deputy, that this level of importation of fossil fuels is not sustainable in the longer terms. And, you know, given the political and social uncertainties that do exist with regard to the provision of oil and gas, we risk further exposure as an island nation to energy security and energy prices. We also have commitments under the climate change commitments that we've engaged in to decarbonise our energy sector and reduce considerably our carbon emissions by 2020. Therefore, I believe we must look across all sectors of the economy to find where renewables can be utilised. The main contributing sectors to carbon emissions in Ireland is agriculture, transport and energy. And, you know, to me, with regard to agriculture, we have ambitious targets for Harvest 2020 in the areas of beef and dairy production. And, you know, I hear deputies from all sides calling for action on climate change. But then, on the other hand, when we have realistic propositions with regard to reducing our carbon footprint in this country, they then oppose those projects also. And, you know, wind energy is a perfect example of this. If we wanted nuclear energy here in this country in the morning, I suspect the same deputies would be jumping up and down again. So, you know, I do believe we need to show some leadership as politicians and to, you know, not just be telling people what they want to hear if we are really serious about reducing our carbon emissions. I believe, you know, and I welcome the fact that the Minister and the Government are listening to genuine concerns with regard to wind farms. And there are genuine concerns out there and communities are voicing them. And it is in this respect I welcome the planning guidelines, the revised planning guidelines that Minister O'Sullivan is presently out on public consultation with. And I would certainly hope that they will address a lot of the concerns that communities and the general public have. I also welcome the fact that Minister Rabbitt recently announced that he intends to publish a green paper on energy provision in this country. And again, I think that will give all of the stakeholders an opportunity to engage in that process and to voice their opinions on how exactly they see us providing for energy security in this island nation of ours for the next 20, 30, 40 and 50 years. We have commitments with regard to decarbonisation. We have exposures to risk in the sense of dependence on fossil fuels. And, you know, we have opportunities in this country to maximise the potential of our natural resources. So, like, I am disappointed with some politicians taking the populist line nearly all of the time. You know, telling people what they want to hear, calling for climate change action, as I said, but then opposing renewable projects. I think what we need is some vision and some leadership. We need a rational debate on energy security, not only in this country, but globally. We need a rational debate on climate change, and as I said, the three sectors that contribute to carbon emissions in this country are agriculture, which we are very dependent on as an economy for recovery and for growth. Transport is the other one. We're very limited as an island nation with regard to how we can reduce our carbon emissions for transport. There is very slow progress in the whole area of e-cars. I would certainly like to see more, but that wouldn't put a dent in the targets that we need to achieve. And the last one is energy. And again, when we mention energy, we need to look at all of the alternatives. Biomass is being mooted as one solution. There is issues there around security of supply and the supply chain for biomass. But wind farms, I believe, and I've said this publicly, I am in support of wind farms where they are properly planned, properly managed, and they do not impact on the communities in a negative way. And that is why we need strong planning guidelines, and that is why the Minister is bringing these forward. But as politicians, we can't have it every way, and there will come a time when the opposition that are here tonight may be in government down the future, and we will regret the day that we didn't take action with regard to climate change and with reducing our carbon emissions. So I accept the genuine concerns of the opposition and why this bill is put forward. But my understanding is if this bill was actually implemented in the morning, it could literally wipe out the entire potential for realistic wind generation in this country. So I would have concerns regarding the bill. I understand that the government is allowing it to pass second stage, but I think there is further opportunity now with the Green Paper on energy, with the planning guidelines that are coming forward, to try and protect and address the concerns of communities. But I believe that the energy security issues that this country faces needs a wide-ranging, diverse response that includes wind energy, that includes biomass, that includes geothermal, and that reduces our dependence on fossil fuels if we are to have a competitive, secure industries in this country in the future. So, Minister, I wish you well with your planning guidelines. I would certainly hope the wider public can see that they are a genuine effort to address the concerns that people have, that there will be opportunities within those guidelines for local authorities and indeed for An Bord Pleanála to manage the development of wind energy in this country in a responsible manner. I think that is the kind of leadership we need, and I think, you know, we have serious challenges in this country economically, in energy terms and in climate change terms. We cannot be all things to everyone, and I'm saying that to all politicians of all persuasions and none. We need to show leadership on this particular issue. Thank you,
Doyle. 6 minutes, please.
Okay, thank you, Lascan Corla. But I also welcome the opportunity to speak and thank the Sinn Féin party for bringing forward this bill. I think in its general thrust, it's aimed at focusing on the challenge of capitalising on our wind resource, while at the same time taking into account the possible negative impacts that unregulated, uncontrolled development of the wind sector could have on communities. I have to say I wholeheartedly agree with almost everything Deputy Coffey has said. It is very difficult to exist on this planet without having an impact. It's actually impossible. We're talking about, in our Agriculture Committee, on a total land use policy, about trying to reconcile our climate change obligations under 2020 targets and our Food Harvest 2020 target and goals and aspirations, more than aspirations, actually targets, to up production and increase export value of from the agri and agri-food sector. And no doubt we'll actually when we see the marine harvest, harvesting our ocean wealth rather, initiatives, when they come on board, that they also will have impact. So it is impossible, and I've looked at the range of alternatives. And by the way, back in my early days on Wicklow County Council, we had members from the Green Party who derided Wicklow County Council and other local authorities for not having a wind energy strategy. And it was all flavour of the month until people started to have a problem with it. And a lot of wind farms, and we have smaller wind farm organisations as well as the large multiple corporates to which some people have referred, who are actually building away small units in smaller wind farms, which have proven to be economically viable in areas and enhancing local income for local communities and local both community groups and private individuals with small holdings in otherwise less favoured areas for farming purposes. So I think, taking the Minister's point that in good faith not to oppose the bill rather than for any political gain, that last December a process was started, closing date was February, and guidelines will be put in place with specifically dealing with the issues of noise, setback and shadow flicker. I don't think it's as simple as, and with a statutory minimum distance of 500 metres from the nearest residence, I think that's the actual intent, which isn't statutorily on the statute books. It's a guideline at the moment, but not statutorily imposable. So I think that is welcome. But to simply impose a minimum distance, I don't think is feasible, because there's a lot of other factors. I think noise and flicker and in other environmental concerns are far more relevant than just simply having a default of 1,500 metres or whatever, because land topography can change. As somebody said over on the other benches, that sometimes because of topography, sound can actually bounce from further afield than if it was nearer, and that happens. That's something that's an actual fact. So I do believe that we have an onus on us to capitalise on a resource, which is wind. I also think we have to put paid to the propaganda that says that all of the pylons are needed just simply for the extra wind. As I understand it, Gate 3 can be accommodated under the current network from Airgrid. That the whole purpose of pylons is to facilitate fast transmission from power station to power station to power station into an area in the event of a power station going out. And it seems that if we are, and we mentioned it yesterday, or it's been mentioned in the past about water and energy and infrastructure are generally the things that foreign investors, native investors will look at to ensure that they can actually start a business, continue a business without any threat to the lights going out, without any threat to the water not being available or being safe. So those basic facts, pieces of infrastructure have to be in place. So I think the onus is on us to take responsibility for it. If we continue to have our dependence on what can be a volatile source, which is fossil fuels, from parts of the world where there isn't always stability, while at the same time turning our back on resources that we have. And I know maybe it's not popular to say it, but during the middle of the Crimean crisis, President Obama made the point that it's up to people to make sure that they actually secure as much supply. And with some areas that I would have a disagreement with, and I know Deputy Colreevy and others on the border in Leitrim and that have with fracking, but the point was made, get the energy yourselves. Don't be depending on oil coming or gas coming through a pipeline that may not be always there for us, or the price may become unaffordable and uneconomic. So we have to take responsibility. I seen going through a certain county in the Midlands no AD here. I thought it was me. But it was actually anaerobic digestion, not Andrew Doyle. And I mean, there's no to everything. So somewhere along the way, we have to be reasonable, be responsible, take as good a regard as the environment. One final thing,
Yep.
In the last committee, in the last Dáil on climate change, a question was posed to the director of Trócaire about birth control in the third world. And the answer he was given from the point of view of carbon. The average emission tonnage of individual in the United States is 20 tonnes, is 12 in the EU, and is 0.7 in the third world. So the response was, where should the birth control be imposed? That's the sort of arguments we get into if we get silly about this.
Thank you, Deputy Helen McEntee, 6 minutes.
Thank you, Laskin Corla. I'm happy to have the opportunity to discuss this bill or to speak on this bill, and I want to thank Deputies Culreevy and Stanley and Farris for introducing it. Of course, like many things, it's an issue that's relevant to most of the constituents in Meath East and, of course, in Meath West. Although I do welcome the bill, I must say that I'm a bit disappointed, not surprised, but disappointed that it's been used as yet another political football. Last night I listened as Fine Gael councillors in my own county were accused of working for wind energy companies, something that I think is unfounded and it holds no merit. And I think to be accused of staying quiet and not standing up for the people in my community, I really disagree with that, and I honestly believe if some people are on the other side of the benches that we'd be listening to a different story. Saying that, I'm a member of the Transport and Communications Committee. This morning we had the SEAI in before us, and I would agree, as they clearly stated, we need to develop renewable energy as part of our overall energy strategy to help us meet our 2020 renewable energy targets. We have a huge natural resource there, which of course we have an abundance of in Ireland, and that is wind. And I know we're hearing a lot of people say, why don't we look at tidal energy and offshore energy? And there is a lot of work being done on that at the moment, but I don't think enough work has been done to actually meet our needs for 2020. So that's something we need to work on. There's a company in Louth right next to me, and I think there's 5 or 6 other companies looking at tidal energy. But we can't deny that jobs, revenue for the economy, lower carbon emissions, these are just some of the benefits from wind energy. Of course, we need to do it in a holistic way, a way that optimises, of course, the benefits, and at the same time it makes sure that people's concerns are met and that local communities are fully involved in the process and that the benefits are clear for all to see. And I think Minister Roberts alluded to that in relation to the intergovernmental agreements. Until all the benefits are seen, nothing will happen on that. I think perhaps where we fall down on this issue, and again we've seen it in Meath in relation to the pylons, communication is key, and unfortunately this is where we seem to fall down again, where there's lack of communication, misinformation starts to breed and starts to appear, and people get confused and angry. So I think we need to be able to communicate the benefits of renewable energy to the public, but we also need to be upfront and honest about a lot of the projects that are being talked about. And this goes not just for the developers but also the people on the ground. I recently saw a newsletter, it didn't actually come to my door, but I saw it from the area, where there was a map and there was possibly 250 possible sites for wind turbines. Now, as long as I'm a TD and I'm living in Meath, there will never be 250 turbines in the county. But again, I think it's a lack of communication, it's breeding misinformation, and this is where we have the problem. There are a lot of other concerns, obviously, a lot of them focusing on the height of the proposed turbines, the setback distances, and of course, obviously, the possible effects that it will have on the agricultural industry or the equine industry. I think in my own constituency, the setback distance is an issue that is most prevalent. The 500 metres, a lot of people feel is far too close. But again, I think we have to be realistic about this. If you look at the county of Meath, it's a funny place if you look at the planning map, because there is no set planning area. There's a lot of houses positioned in a lot of areas, and so if we were to put an unrealistic setback distance, we wouldn't have any renewable energy in the country. But I do think it's an issue that we need to look at, because it is one that's causing more concern for people. In regards to the noise limits, again, I know this is something that Minister O'Sullivan is addressing in the review of the guidelines, but we do need to look at a lot of conflicting information that is coming out on that also. I do know that modern wind turbines have the facility to measure sunlight levels again, so the whole issue of flicker can be addressed. I think it's important we don't make the same mistakes that have been made in a lot of other countries. So I think the decisions that we made need to be built on lessons learned elsewhere. Again, as I said, I think the lack of information has been the cause for concern, and the lack of engagement. But again, as I said, Minister Sullivan's recent review of the 2006 wind energy guidelines, which received over 7,000 submissions, with the aim of the review, it's to implement best practice guidelines for wind development, and I think these guidelines are very welcome, but obviously we need to make sure that they enforce proper regulation. I'm also pleased to hear that the Strategic Environmental Assessment Scoping Report is now being prepared, that there will be a report on public consultation and a cost-benefits analysis in the coming phases of the project. While I agree with some of the information that's in this bill, I think a lot of it is very negative. And just to go back to what Deputy Doyle has said, we can't depend on fossil fuels, we can't depend on energy coming from other countries, we can't stand still, we have to move with the times, and unfortunately, if we stand still, we're not going to be able to function as a company in the coming years. So I feel that a lot of the projects being proposed are very beneficial for the country, and they're beneficial in securing our future energy needs and providing jobs and money for the economy. I just think it needs to be done in a transparent and fair manner, and I think that's what will happen. Thank you.
Michelle Mulhern, who has 6 minutes.
Thank you, Cathaoirleach. Cathaoirleach, I have a number of issues with this piece of draft legislation. First of all, the way this bill is drafted by Sinn Féin suggests that at the moment, when planning applications are being considered for wind farms by a county council or on boards planola, that no regard is being given to human beings, their health or the environment, and somehow that this bill will champion those considerations. This is absolutely not true. The truth is we have a very robust, very transparent planning system in this country, which is backed up by the Department Wind Energy Development Guidelines for Planning Authorities, which goes back to 2006. Further, existing planning legislation is principle-based and requires that wind energy development demonstrates environmental benefits as well as minimising environmental and social impacts through careful consideration of location, scale and design. And I know, as we speak here tonight, that there are many people who have been involved in trying to promote and develop wind farms who have felt the brunt and disdain of on-board planola and planning authorities when they didn't meet the very high standards that are currently in place when they have been refused their planning permissions. So this bill and its context as set out are misleading. It is of serious concern to me that this bill is now attempting to deal with a number of items like distance from housing, noise and shadow flicker, which are currently under review as part of the Department of Environment, Community and Local Government consultation on proposed revision to the 2006 Wind Energy Guidelines I just referred to. Has Sinn Féin no respect for the views of the many private citizens and other stakeholders who took the time to make a submission in this consultation process? Why have they not waited for the outcome of the review before drafting any document on wind, let alone a piece of legislation? How many times have I heard Sinn Féin refer to the Aarhus Convention and the need for proper consultation with the public? And yet, when the public are consulted, they have no patience to hear what the review is. It seems when it comes to themselves, it doesn't apply. All the talk about and focus on exporting wind energy is crazy and misleading. The reality is we are building wind farms at such a slow rate every year in this country that we will be doing well to meet our legally binding domestic renewable energy targets by 2020 at all. This bill ignores the fact that the EU is moving towards a single electricity market where the movement of electricity generated from one member state to another is envisaged, which should assist with energy security and price. We already operate a single electricity market with Northern Ireland. This bill is totally divorced from this reality. The bill refers to setback distances, but what technical and engineering rationale or evidence explains the distances from housing they've come up with? Also, for example, if there's a hill between me and a turbine, there may be no impact on visual amenity compared to someone whose home is the same distance away as the crow flies, but where the land is flat. Surely there are a lot of other factors to be taken into account than just setback distance. I have personal knowledge of people in my own constituency who live near wind farms a lot closer than 500 metres and are happy to do so. So, you know, the suggestion that this would be binding or that this is the only way to go is not acceptable. The bill stipulates as a standard for noise limits from wind turbines should not exceed those specified in the World Health Organization guidelines for community noise. What about the fact that those noise limits are already in the current 2006 wind energy guidelines? Instead of being honest with the many people out there around our country who have understandable concerns and fears about wind farms and other energy infrastructure, being constructed in their communities. Sinn Féin is capitalising on their fears and in some cases their misery, all in the interests of political gain from their populist position. The truth is Sinn Féin's national policy is pro-wind, yet it is against every proposed wind farm project on the ground around this country. I have personal experience of it. They would want to spell out how they intend to achieve our 2020 renewable energy targets on the basis that they're against every project on the ground. The truth is, we have yet to hear any economic policy from Sinn Féin that would create jobs or wealth in this country. In fact, the only thing they seem to be for, looking back on a manifesto, the only thing they seem to be for, looking back on their manifesto, is a wealth tax on land, which would cripple farmers. I'd like to put that question. I'd like to put that question to Sinn Féin, European and Council candidates, if they support the tax on land written in their manifesto. The manner and the timing of this bill. The manner and the timing of this bill shows Sinn Féin has no bona fides on this very sensitive issue, and is instead trying to hoodwink the people. It's about time they showed some leadership and consistency on the issue, instead of throwing oil on the fire of public fears. This is a most disingenuous piece of draft legislation, and for my own part, I don't believe it is even worthy of further consideration of this government, and I regret that that has been done.
Okay, deputies, and next is on Charlie Flanagan, who has 6 minutes.
Thanks, Cathaoirleach. Undoubtedly, the public debate surrounding wind turbines, which has been going on for some time, has been heated. Has been passionate, and at times has been somewhat less than objective. And I say that following my attendance at a number of public meetings in my constituency and beyond, and I see my constituency colleague Deputy Stanley in the chamber tonight, who I'm sure can testify that these meetings have been rather heated, have been rather difficult, and have been noted perhaps for the amount of information that was not forthcoming, rather than the information that was before the halls or before the communities. And I think it's important, therefore, that the debate be calm and honest on the future of renewable energy in this country. And from that perspective, I probably welcome the bill and the debate this evening. 86% of the national energy requirement is imported at a cost to our state of in excess of €6.2 billion per annum. By 2020, it's envisaged that a third of our electricity consumed here will come from renewable, and our 2020 targets must be met. And we need to discuss the manner in which these targets are to be met without adversely impacting on local communities. I have to say that some wind development companies have shown very little regard for the consultation process that really must occur if communities are going to be convinced and if calm is going to prevail. And this lack of regard has led to an element of fear and an element of mistrust in these communities. This fear and mistrust has in effect given rise to a plethora of misinformation regarding wind energy and wind turbines. I believe that people should have a real and meaningful contribution to the process, and that's why I welcome the current consultation. That consultation did allow for public submissions to be made, and I, along with other colleagues here, made some submissions. I made submissions to both the consultation process, expressing my concerns at the impact of wind turbines will have on rural communities in my constituency and beyond, and my concerns are twofold. Firstly, under the review of wind energy guidelines, I've already called for thoroughbred stud farms and horse racing training facilities to be included under the definition of noise-sensitive properties. Ireland is a world leader in this field when it comes to producing brood mares racehorses and stallions. This is an industry that employs over 14,000 people and makes a direct economic contribution of in excess of £1 billion per annum to the Irish economy. The main concerns expressed by the industry are that the location of the wind farms close to stud farms would have an unsettling effect on the bloodstock. And indeed, a special case, Cathaoirleach, must be made for bloodstock, in particular, as horses are by their nature extremely sensitive animals. Leading bloodstock experts believe that the close proximity of wind turbines would lead to horses reacting unfavourably due to increased noise, the rotation of the wind turbines, the movement of shadows cast by the blades. I made a separate submission with regard to the close proximity of wind turbines to rural dwellings, and I say this as a public representative representing in the main a rural constituency in the Midlands that is currently engaged in a very heated debate on the pros and cons of the turbines. The current proposals by wind farm development companies could see turbines to a height of in excess of 180 metres located in my constituency. The increase in the recommended setback from wind turbines from 250 metres to 500 was an acknowledgement by the authors of the revised wind energy guidelines that wind farms should be located at an appropriate distance from residential areas. I'm personally concerned at the size and scale of some of these turbines. Whilst the minimum setback is preferable, I believe the consideration must also be given to allowing a setback distance that would correlate with the height of the proposed turbines, and that the appropriate separation distance would be applied from a residential area of special amenity value. And I'm pleased that the Minister has acknowledged that this point would require at least further consideration in her speech yesterday. I do preface what I say in the matter of the recommended setback distance, we must consider a study by AERO, the All-Ireland Research Observatory in Maynooth, that says that a setback distance of 2 kilometres would leave a mere 3% of the total land area of the country available to wind farm development. I would like to hear from Minister Rabbitte his views following the decision by both the Irish and UK governments not to proceed with the intergovernmental agreement at this time, and the consequences that that will have for wind turbine developments in the Midlands. So I welcome this debate. I don't agree with much of the legislation, but I think it's important that we attempt to, in this House, to achieve a level of consensus. What is an important industry, but what has given rise to serious and justifiable concerns up and down the country, in particular in my constituency. Thank you.
And Anish, Sandra McLennan, you have 5 minutes.
Minister, simply because people want answers to genuine concerns and take a contrary view to the government does not mean that they are backward or not progressive. And I would suggest that Deputy Mulhern read the bill. I would like to point out that there is a difference between guidelines and legislation, and I would suggest that your comments were quite misleading. Because we are the opposition and we're entitled to bring legislation forward, and we have chosen to do so.
Through the Chair.
In my own constituency in East Cork, there are plans for 11 wind turbines. I applaud the residents of that rural area who have run an effective and informative campaign. I attended their public meetings and was genuinely surprised at the level of support the campaign has. I will continue to work with them until the situation is brought to a satisfactory conclusion. The blame for the fear and confusion that is in our communities lies fairly and squarely at the door of this government. While, of course, I welcome the government's commitment not to oppose this bill tonight, I must sound a word of caution. This must not be a hollow election promise. Minister Rabbitte's record on election promises has a lot to be desired. We must now see the bill being progressed as quickly as possible, and it must be part of an overall energy strategy. Minister Rabbitte should make it an imperative to introduce a green paper on energy strategy. Unfortunately, this government appears not to be interested in developing any such energy strategy. The Memorandum of Understanding signed by Minister Pat Rabbitte and the British Government in January 2013 agreed to export wind energy produced in Ireland to Britain. The memorandum collapsed in March 2014 because of the failure to reach economic agreement on the export of energy. It did not make any economic or environmental sense to export renewable energy from Ireland when we rely so heavily on fossil fuel consumption. There are signs from the Irish Government that they want to re-engage with the British in an attempt to develop wind energy for export from Ireland. This Gambine politics smacks of Banana Republic economics. This goal of 16% of energy from renewable sources by the year 2020 will not be reached if the Government continue to frantically sell off energy generated by wind turbines. The bill in front of us tonight is a reasonable response to that challenge. This bill prevents Government from undermining local authority development plans with the Planning and Development Act 2006. This Act gives power to local government to zone specific areas for the erection of wind turbines. Our bill will serve to strengthen local democracy and accountability. The bill will ensure that any person applying for permission to construct a turbine or farm must provide information to the local residents through placing an advertisement in a local newspaper and placing a sign on the proposed site. Any changes that will be made to land or location will be made available to the public, along with an ordnance survey map pointing out the locations of the turbines. The length of time the construction work will take will be made known to the public. Also, an outline of what planning gain there will be must be made available to the public. Following the current situation in Ukraine, there has been much discussion at a European level about the future of energy security in Europe. This is likely to develop further if relations between the West and Russia remain cold. There is a significant worry in Europe over the possibility of the loss of Russian gas. Sinn Féin have always argued for the development of renewable energy as an alternative source to fossil fuel. However, there must be a varying amount of sources of renewable energy. Ireland cannot rely on wind energy alone, and to guarantee energy security, it must vary its renewable energy potential.
1 minute, Deputy.
Alternative sources must be explored in order to guarantee the security of supply into the future. Self-sustainability in energy production and consumption should be a long-term goal adopted by the Government in their energy strategy. At present, this state is 87.5% reliant on fossil fuels for our energy production. The vast majority of this is imported. This is costing Irish consumers money as fossil fuel prices are determined on the whims of international markets. This results in fuel poverty being a problem in Ireland, with the country recording a significant number of excess winter deaths each year. This bill restricts the Government on exporting renewable energy from Ireland until such time as Ireland's energy demands have been met. In conclusion, the Wind Turbine Regulations Bill is a solution-based, reasonable response to the challenges at local, national and international level.
5 minutes.
I commend at the outset my colleague, Deputy Micheál Kilreavy, for introducing this bill, which is very timely and also very necessary. The Government is not opposing passage of second stage, and while that is welcome, I believe that the Fine Gael mask on this issue has slipped here tonight in the contribution of Deputy Mulherin. Make no mistake, not opposing is not enough. The Government, if sincere, should now ensure that committee and report stages are progressed and that this bill is enacted. Or are we to have a cynical ploy on the part of Government, yet another one, of allowing passage of second stage but then shelving the bill, giving the impression to the public prior to the local elections in this case that they will enact it at some future stage? I hope not, but I now fear certainly that that may well be the case. I will recall, or rather I should say I well recall, in previous Dáil when we warned of what was to come if the so-called critical infrastructure legislation of the former government, the Fianna Fáil-led government, was passed. It was designed to ride roughshod over the planning process, over elected councillors and over local and indeed regional communities. One result of that has been one of the biggest planning scandals ever. The Poolbeg incinerator project. Nearly €100 million of public money has been spent and not a block laid on an incinerator that no one wants, that is not needed, and that the elected members of the relevant local authority have repeatedly voted against. If the proposed network of gigantic wind turbines across the Midlands is allowed to go ahead, facilitated by that same strategic infrastructure legislation, it will be another massive scandal. It is ironic at a time when Fáilte Ireland and the entire tourist industry is trying to attack tourists, both foreign and domestic, to the less visited parts of Ireland, that it is proposed to effectively industrialise huge swathes of the landscape across the middle counties of Ireland. It seems to be accepted by the so-called planners at national level that these landscapes are less attractive than lofty mountains and coastlines with cliffs and harbours with expansive ocean vistas, and therefore these midland counties can be blighted with giant wind turbines. Only this week, Minister Deenahan opened a section of a new cycle and walkway which is planned to traverse the country, attracting visitors and opening up less visited parts of Ireland, and that is welcome. The scale of what is planned here is enormous, but I doubt if many people outside the communities affected realise the extent of what is to be imposed. We are talking about some 2,000 massive turbines across the counties of Laois, Offaly, Westmeath, Kildare and Meath. Just for a moment, imagine the impact of that. And the supreme irony is that this is not to meet the demands for sustainable energy sources for our country. It is to generate electricity for export to Britain, with the private companies involved engaged in a purely profit-making exercise. The attempt to put a green gloss on this is just that, a cheap paint job to disguise the ugly reality. This bill would ensure that sustainable energy generated through properly planned wind turbines cannot be exported abroad when this state has yet to meet its own sustainable energy targets. It would force companies wishing to develop industrial wind farms to advise, consult with and have proper regard for host communities. And it would ensure that local authorities can, by law, force companies to meet the cost of repairing or upgrading local infrastructure during the construction of industrial wind farms, and that those same companies are responsible for recycling wind farms when they have to be decommissioned. I'll not need it. I will conclude by stating that ultimately we want to see a halt to the privatisation of our natural resources, including wind energy. We want to see our natural resources employed to the collective benefit of Ireland, we the people. We will continue, Minister, we will continue, Sinn Féin will continue to campaign for this bill to be enacted and enforced post this evening's debate.
Agus an teachta Pearstochtaí cúig nómad.
Aigad a chairlaí agus bóilm fáilte thurban an bille seán ort agus caiimar nar bhfuil me a réir go an rialtas ag tuairtaíart an bille bhí me ancesta ach géisteart leis an méidir bhí le ré ag cuidsta de hóileacaithe as páirtí na Gael. Tá sé inta sáilear náhfuil an páirtí ar a léad an páirtí sin ag tuairtaíart an bille seo agus go bhfuil sibh ag tuairtaíart an ort sa dó is go mé war gcóirlearí condaid ar an talú a tá faoi brú mór ag bailte éitiúil agus ag grúpaí éitiúile glacu lena trálínte seo ach tá sé inta sáilear náhfuil sibh na riire fudud an reachtaíocht seo agus go suí sé mar a dúirt an teachta ó céalan ar fáid fada go leor gan a hall gotí an chead céim eile sin céim an cáiste. I think it is, first of all, I want to welcome this piece of legislation. I know that a lot of work has gone into the legislation from the Office of Deputy Micheál Kilreevy and Brian Stanley, and I want to acknowledge as well Councillor McCarthy, who's here in the gallery, who was involved in the submission to the department and also some of the input to the legislation. But there has been a lot of work, and if anybody took the time to actually read the legislation, they would see that there was extensive consultation along the Midlands in particular, but not exclusively with the Midlands, because the issue of wind farm development isn't a preserve of that area, although the proposals are frightening, to say the least. It's an issue that has impacted in a negative sense in my own county, and in some cases in a positive sense, because there is an issue where we need to have renewable energy, and obviously I welcome the development of wind farm where it is done in tandem with local needs.
but there are cases where local communities, local activists, local ordinary people have to come together, have to become experts in how to take on the major wind farms and take cases to An Bord Pleanála in oral hearings and all the costs that are associated with them. Because we in this House, or in governments, in previous governments, have failed to deal with this issue, in a proper, robust manner. And that is why Sinn Féin have brought this piece of legislation forward, which actually removes the issue from guidelines into, as Deputy McClellan said, into statutory legislation. I think, you know, listening to one deputy in particular, it's quite alarming, you know, given the salary that TDs earn and the resources that all of us as deputies enjoy in terms of backup staff, that somebody can come to this chamber and peddle out the mistruths that have been peddled on the backbenches of Fine Gael today, both in our economic policy on our jobs and in relation to wind energy. I note last night, the Minister said in her contribution here, she said that she appreciates the view of members who advocate for a legislative approach which has merit, yet the deputy in question, Deputy Mulhern, believes that there is no merit whatsoever for legislative approach. This piece of legislation makes sense. It covers a wide range of areas in dealing with excess energy. I don't think anybody could argue that we shouldn't export our energy until our own needs are met, that we actually empower local authorities, empower local councillors to actually determine where wind farms are best placed or where wind farms shouldn't be placed in their own county, and that can't be circumvented by the critical infrastructure bill or decisions by An Bord Pleanála. I think nobody in this House could actually object to the issue of proper public consultation, informing the public, informing the community of what the impact on construction stage and the impact of the wind farm itself would be on the community that you want to host it. I don't think anybody would have an issue with actually the World Health Organization's guidelines in terms of minimum noise, or actually removing flicker from wind farms, or the impact of flicker, particularly on those with autism and epilepsy, and we know the impact it has on those that have those conditions. The setback distance, again, not to focus on Deputy Mulhern, but I would love to see the mountain that she's talking about that's blocking the wind farm that's only 500 metres away from her. It must be a very, very thin mountain indeed. But maybe she will invite me down to Mayo to see these very unique mountains. It could be one of the wonders of the world. But the reality is this is a very measured proposal based on international best practice, where the scale of the wind farm, the height of the turbine, would actually be a measure as to how far the setback should be. So it's not a blunt instrument, it's a well thought out, and also dealing with the impact of the destruction that happens when the construction and maintenance of these farms are taking place, in terms of the destruction of local roads. And we all know, because of the cuts that your government has imposed, that local authorities are starved from that type of funding to actually fit the potholes, or indeed in some cases the craters in the local roads leading up to the wind farm developments that are used by people in that community. So this is a very sensible piece of legislation. I would hope that the government will have the courage of their convictions, not just to support this in theory, to save the blushes of your elected councillors and candidates across the state who are facing pressure from communities who rightly know that this legislation makes sense, but actually to do the right thing, allow this to go as soon as possible to committee stage, and let's have a proper teasing out of this issue, and let's bring forward a legislative basis of how we can ensure that wind farms can be developed, but at the same time protecting vulnerable people, protecting the local infrastructure, and protecting the communities on which these are placed.
I suppose, like other speakers, I'm happy to hear that the government will be backing and supporting this the bill tonight. I suppose it shows it's a positive development. I think it's the first time the government have actually backed a Sinn Féin bill during this session. And I think hopefully it shows some sort of political maturity on behalf of the government, and hopefully this is a new turning point in relation to the government. I suppose, like most of us in here, we're faced every day with problems in people's lives, and I suppose as legislators we're asked to come up with solutions in relation to that. And I think what Deputy Kulrevi has done with this bill is try to put forward an alternative